Hi, my name is Elena. I'm 29 years old, and last month I bought my dream house. I scrubbed the counters, hung string lights, and cooked chili. Every chair was waiting for the people I called family, but no one came. They all went to see my sister's brand new car instead. At 5:41, I turned on the lights of my empty home. That's when my phone lit up with Dad's name. His voice was sharp, clipped. "We need to talk now." I thought it was about love and family, but it wasn't. It was about what they planned to take from me. I grew up in a house where money wore costumes. Sometimes it was called love, sometimes responsibility, sometimes duty. Whatever word fit the day. When I was 14, Dad charged me room and board. $100 a month for my grocery store paycheck. He said it would teach me the real world. I handed him the bills like I was paying a fine. At 16, I asked where the money went. Mom said, "Into the family." When I asked to see proof, Dad laughed. That laugh still rings in my ears. By then, I kept records. A little notebook, later a phone file. Every payment, every emergency, every dollar into fog. It wasn't petty. It was survival. It was how I kept reality real. Meanwhile, my younger sister Tessa lived under a softer sky. When I bought a used car, I changed my own oil. When she got hers, Dad handed her keys to a new hatchback. He said, "A young woman needs something safe." And everyone clapped. When she dropped out of college, they called it vision. When she started a candle business without taxes, they called it potential. When she became a content creator, I did the math for the ring light, the phone upgrade, the creative space. And when I said no, when I refused to co-sign a lease or add a phone line, the words shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't family. I was stingy. I was cold. I was a ledger with legs. Mom's voice would turn glassy. "Don't be a ledger, Elena. We fed you, we clothed you, we did everything for you." Dad would stare out the window and deliver the blow. A real daughter provides. That's how love was measured in my house. Not in hugs or words, but in transactions. The more I gave, the more they asked. And the less I existed outside their needs. I learned early not to expect applause. You do the right thing. You keep moving. And if you want something of your own, you sacrifice in silence. I thought buying a house would change that equation. I thought it meant they couldn't use "we" to secretly mean you. I was wrong. Because my housewarming wasn't just empty. It was the setup for something worse. I started saving at 25, not spare change in a jar. Real saving. Overtime shifts, no vacations, roommates who left dirty dishes. I named my spreadsheet brick by brick. Each row was a small denial. Skip takeout, save 40. Skip a trip, save 300. Skip new shoes, save 80. I stacked sacrifices until they formed walls. 4 years later, I signed my name 15 times in one afternoon. When the title officer slid the folder toward me, she called me homeowner. The word felt heavy, delicious, like a knot loosening in my throat. I bought a little Craftsman. 2 bedrooms, a squeaky hallway, a fireplace with a crooked blue fish tile. The backyard had a lemon tree that clicked in the wind. The porch swing came with the house. If I promised to sit there. For the first time, I had a door that locked for me. Not for roommates, not for parents, not for Tessa's next move. Mine. When I told my family, their smiles bent sideways. Mom said, "Make sure you have a guest room for Tessa." Dad said, "Add a garage so I can finally store my saw." Tessa asked, "Your kitchen has amazing light. Can I film there?" Still, I let myself celebrate. I brought cheap cider and paper cups. I took a photo with the sold sign. I posted "Housewarming Saturday 5 p.m. chili, cornbread." All week I scrubbed and polished. Rolled paint over scuffs, bought folding chairs, strapped a secondhand rug to my old Civic. I bought 8 bowls that matched. I lit citronella candles that smelled like lemon cleaner. I simmered chili at 4 o'clock, cornbread at 4:20. I even chilled 1 root beer for Dad, because he likes to pretend he's a kid. At 5:02, I checked the street. Empty. At 5:11, I lit the candles anyway. At 5:18, I texted ETA. Mom wrote, "Soon." Dad didn't answer. Tessa sent a photo in sunglasses. Standing before a glossy red car, we did a thing. At 5:33, another buzz. A video of Mom filming Tessa rev the engine. Someone laughed. Everyone clapped. I stood in my spotless kitchen, my chili bubbling like it was mocking me. I turned off the burner. At 5:41, I flipped on my living room lights. The room looked staged, like a listing photo. Perfect. Empty. I ate a bowl over the sink. The chili was good. The silence was louder. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just chewed and looked at the doorway, where a draft slipped past new weather stripping. That night, the lemon tree dropped 1 fruit. The porch swing creaked. and my phone lit with Dad's name. "We need to talk, now." I knew that tone. It wasn't congratulations. It was logistics. It was what they thought they could take. And I should have known then. The housewarming wasn't just empty. It was the prelude to an ambush. They didn't call first. They arrived in a convoy like raiders. Dad's truck in front, Mom's SUV behind it, Tessa in her shiny red car, temporary tags stuck crooked in the window. I watched through the peephole. Mom pressed her lips together, ready to scold. Tessa checked her hair in the visor mirror. Dad had a clipboard. Of course he did. I opened the door before they rang. "Hey," I said flat. Mom air-kissed the air near my cheek. "We'll bless the house after," she said. "After what?" I asked. Dad brushed past me like he lived here. Tessa filmed a pan for her story. "Look, you guys, my sister's house." No one took off their shoes. No one looked at the crooked blue fish tile. No one asked about the lemon tree. Dad set the clipboard on my counter. "Let's get down to it," he said. "To what?" I asked, though I already knew. He flipped a page, printouts, headings, bullet points. His eyes lit like this was a project he'd long prepared. "First item. Since your sister's insurance is predatory, we're moving her registration to your address. She'll park here sometimes." "No," I said. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "No registration at my address unless the person lives here." Mom's voice went soft, syrupy. "She'll be here all the time," she said. "She needs a stable base." Tessa leaned on the counter, phone still in hand. "It's not a big deal," she said. "Victimless." "It's not about crime," I said. "It's about my name." Dad exhaled, humoring a stubborn child. "You're being rigid. Next item. We need to get your father on the deed." "You are my father," I snapped. He ignored it. "For estate reasons," he said. "So things are clean if anything happens to you." "If anything happens to me," I said. "My will is in my desk drawer. 2 witnesses signed it. No one goes on my deed." Mom's smile thinned toward sharp. "We're protecting you," she said. "You don't understand how the world works." "I understand perfectly," I said. Dad flipped another page. "Fine, then at least pull some cash out. Refinance, a small equity line, 80,000. We'll help manage it. Tessa needs a down payment for a storefront." There it was. The reason they skipped my housewarming. Not to celebrate me. Not to bless my house. But to turn my home into their leverage. I stared at the chili-stained sink. The counter I scrubbed spotless for them. Suddenly, it wasn't my family standing there. It was creditors with the same last name. And that was the twist I hadn't wanted to believe. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a bank. I kept my voice level. "No," I said again. "No deed. No refinance. No registrations. None of it." Dad's eyebrows shot up like I'd cursed at church. Mom's eyes shimmered, practiced tears forming on cue. Tessa's phone hovered, hungry for drama. Dad leaned forward, elbows on my counter. "Be a good daughter," he said. "Step up, provide." I laughed once, sharp. "You taught me to provide," I said. "You charged me rent at 14. I stepped up, I saved. I did this on my own. This house is not a group project." The air tightened. That moment I was supposed to fold. I didn't. Tessa jabbed a finger. "You don't even use both bedrooms," she said. "I could move in, help with content. Pay you a little." "How much?" I asked. She blinked. Dad slapped the clipboard. "Enough. Here's what's going to happen. We'll fix the deed. We'll refi. We'll register the car. You'll host Thanksgiving. You have the space." "No," I repeated, calm and steady. Each syllable a lock clicking shut. Mom's tears spilled. "Why are you punishing us?" she whispered. "You're our daughter. We raised you. Family reallocates resources to the child in need. Your sister is launching. You're steady. You carry more, then she'll carry you." "I just settled here," I said. "This house is my foundation. I won't let you dig it out." Dad's tone dropped low. "You don't slam doors on blood." "I'm not slamming," I said. "I'm locking what I paid for." The silence cracked. Tessa sneered. "You're lucky. You got a house. Some of us actually need help." "I needed help too," I said. "I just gave it to myself." Dad jabbed a finger. "If you do this, don't come crying when you're alone," Mom added softly. "And don't expect us to show up when you need something." I stared at the lemon on my counter, bright against the spotless surface. I wanted to throw it. I didn't. Instead, I straightened my shoulders. "House rules," I said. "No registrations unless you live here. No keys handed out. No one on my deed. No loans for boutiques or saws. If Grandma needs medicine, I'll help her directly. Otherwise, this house is not your ATM." Dad barked a laugh like receipt was dirty. "Yep," I said. "A receipt. From now on, everything has one." Mom shook her head. "You've changed." "I've moved," I said. And this house moves with me. They left without another word. Tessa revved her new car so loud it rattled the windows. The sound faded into the night, but the tremor in my chest stayed. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the start of fallout. The door shut behind them, heavy as a verdict. I stood in the silence, heartbeat echoing in my teeth. Within an hour, the family group chat erupted. Mom, your behavior today was unacceptable. Dad, ungrateful. Tessa, my sister is sabotaging me with DMV screenshots. Her friends sent laughing emojis. A stranger sent a snake. I muted the chat, turned off my ringer. Then I got to work. I changed the lock codes, froze my credit, and flagged my property records at the county. I called the dealership. Yes, someone tried to use my address. No, it didn't go through. Paper trails keep reality real. Mom's voicemails swung from scolding to pleading. If you love me, call me. Dad sent refinance calculators captioned, "Be reasonable." Tessa posted, "Sometimes the people closest to you laugh when you drive. Drive anyway." But in the quiet of my house, I realized I wasn't alone. Grandma called late one night. "Are you eating?" she asked. "Yes," I told her. She chuckled. "Good girl. Don't let your mother guilt you with your walls." That was her version of I love you. On Sunday, while my parents held a family meeting, I grilled 2 burgers. I gave one to my neighbor, the woman who waved at me on moving day. She smiled. "You're a good neighbor." That felt more real than any blessing ritual. A week later, I hosted another housewarming. Not for them. For me, coworkers, basketball friends, my neighbor. We ate chili and cornbread, laughed on the squeaky porch swing. At 9:10, someone said, "This place feels like you." And for the first time, I believed it. Because family isn't ownership. Boundaries aren't betrayal. Freedom can sound like a locked door, and laughter inside it. This house is mine. Finally, it's mine. If you've ever had to draw a line with family, you know how heavy and how freeing that line can be. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. If you've been through it, you're not alone.
The chandeliers glowed softly over the reception hall in Charleston, the kind of setting people dream about for their wedding day. Crystal glasses clinked, candles flickered, and 300 guests leaned in as my sister Vivian, radiant in her lace gown, lifted the microphone. I sat at a long banquet table near the front, my dress carefully chosen to be elegant but not distracting. It wasn't my day, after all. I had spent months helping plan every detail, writing checks that no one asked twice about. The floral arrangements, the quartet, even the ice sculptures my money had smoothed it all into place. I thought I'd at least earned a quiet corner of peace that night. Vivian smiled wide, her voice carrying easily through the speakers. "I just want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate with us tonight," she said, pausing as the room hushed with anticipation. Then, with that familiar glint in her eyes, she added, "And of course, a big shout out to my forever single sister, Selena." The laughter rolled through the room like a wave. Some guests chuckled politely, others bent forward in their seats, shaking with amusement. A few clapped as though it were the punchline to the best joke of the night. I smiled, too, because what else could I do? My face felt stiff, my palms damp against the napkin in my lap. The sound of 300 people laughing at my expense rang in my ears. Vivian kept going, her tone sweet but sharp enough to cut. She made all this possible. Really. Guess staying single has its perks. Right. The crowd laughed again, and she beamed, soaking in their approval. I swallowed hard, willing my expression to stay composed. If anyone looked closely, maybe they'd see the truth in my eyes. But no one did. They were too busy celebrating her joke. The irony pressed against my chest half this wedding. Her dream wedding was standing on the foundation of my quiet sacrifices. Yet here I was, reduced to a punchline. I folded my napkin slowly, steadying my breath as Vivian passed the microphone to the maid of honor. The clinking of glasses rose again, but the laughter still echoed inside me, sharper than any words I could have spoken, and in that moment, the old story of my life replayed itself. Vivian dazzling the room, and me sitting in the shadows, holding everything together. But shadows can hold more than silence. Sometimes, They hold the kind of truth no one sees coming. The laughter from the reception lingered in my ears. But my mind drifted backward, back to the streets of Savannah where Vivian and I grew up. She had always been the dazzling one. Even as a child, she knew how to tilt her chin just right, how to flash a smile that made adults gush. Teachers adored her. Neighbors commented on how she'd surely go far. And me, I was the quiet one, the dependable daughter who never made waves. When the light bill was overdue, I babysat after school to cover it. When our father's hours at the dock were cut, I picked up shifts at a diner to stretch the grocery money. No one applauded those sacrifices. They were simply expected. Our mother doted on Vivian's natural charm. She bought her pageant dresses and sat front row at every recital. My report cards, marked with straight A's, were tacked onto the fridge for a week and then quietly taken down. Selena's steady, they'd say, as if steadiness couldn't be extraordinary. By the time high school ended, the pattern was carved into stone. Vivian, crowned homecoming queen, floated on dreams of glamour and admiration. I balanced 2 jobs and saved for college, knowing no one else would. She was praised for potential. I was depended on for responsibility. It wasn't that I resented her beauty or her shine. It was that my role seemed written before I even understood it be the backbone. Hold everything steady. Stay in the shadows so Vivian could glitter. But even shadows can grow restless. Over time, I began to realize that being overlooked gave me a strange kind of freedom. I could move without fanfare, build without interference. I learned to carry weight quietly, to turn invisibility into armor. And years later, when the world thought I was still that invisible backbone, I had already been laying the foundations of something far more powerful than anyone imagined. By the time I turned 30, I had already accepted my role as the dependable sister, the one who paid bills, who showed up without being asked, who never needed the spotlight. What I hadn't accepted was being treated as if my life were a waiting room for something better that would never come. That same year, a relationship I had believed was steady and lasting collapsed in a single night. Betrayal cut deep. But instead of breaking me, it pushed me inward, toward a new kind of resolve. If love could not be relied on, then I would build something else, something no one could take from me. I left Savannah and moved to Charlotte, where I knew no one and no one knew me. In a modest loft with brick walls and second-hand furniture, I started Whitmore Strategies. It began simply consulting for small companies that couldn't afford flashy firms. I understood operations. I understood efficiency. And most of all, I understood people who felt overlooked. One contract led to another, and soon I was studying acquisitions, buying struggling mid-sized firms and reshaping them into profitable ventures. I learned to move quietly, making decisions without drawing attention. My old sedan carried me from one meeting to another, blending into parking lots where no one suspected the woman stepping out owned the building inside. The more I built, the less I shared. When family asked what I was doing, I kept it vague. To them, I was still the single sister dabbling in work to pass the time. To me, I was constructing something far larger than they could fathom, months before Vivian's wedding. I finalized my most ambitious deal, yet a controlling stake in Stanton Dynamics, a tech company with national contracts, and as fate would have it, the very place where Graham, her fiancé, had made his career. It felt like the universe had drawn a circle I hadn't intended to close. But I kept the knowledge tucked away, certain no one in my family would have cared, even if I told them. When Vivian announced her engagement to Graham Alden, it was as though the whole family had been waiting for the moment. He was polished, ambitious, and eager to climb higher than his own family name could take him. At dinners, he spoke as if every conversation were a networking opportunity, turning even small talk into a sales pitch. I could see why Vivian adored him. He was the mirror she'd been waiting for, reflecting her own hunger for admiration. Almost immediately, talk turned to the wedding. Not a simple ceremony, of course, but a vineyard estate outside Charleston, the kind that came with chandeliers, garden terraces, and a bill that could have bought a house. No one asked whether I would contribute. They simply assumed I would. It was the same old pattern. I was the reliable one, the one who had money put away, though none of them bothered to ask how. I watched as the estimates climbed catering, floral arrangements, the imported string quartet, and I signed checks quietly, letting the numbers slip from my business account as though they were nothing. They weren't nothing. Each dollar had been earned with long nights, negotiations, and risks no one in my family even imagined I was capable of taking. But they saw it only as my duty, my role as the older sister. One evening, while we reviewed final details, Vivian leaned back in her chair and gave me a little smirk. "At least you get to feel part of something big for once," she said, her tone casual, almost affectionate if you didn't know her as I did. The words stung, sharp and dismissive, but I kept my face calm. I told myself it wasn't about me, that her day should be perfect, free of conflict. If my role was to fade into the background so she could shine, then I would play it, just as I always had. So I smiled, I nodded, and I agreed to one more transfer, one more invoice covered. My sister's dream would be built on foundations she never bothered to see. And I reminded myself, as I tucked away the sting of her words, that silence sometimes holds more power than it seems. The night before the wedding, the vineyard glowed with soft lanterns as family and friends gathered for the rehearsal dinner. Vivian floated through the room like a queen already on her throne. Graham at her side, his arm draped around her possessively. I sat at a smaller table, content to sip my wine and watch. I had no need to be the center of attention. After dessert, Vivian slipped into the chair beside me. Her perfume was sharp, her smile practiced. "Selena," she began lightly, "tomorrow's going to be important. I need you to promise me something." I raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Don't talk about your little business," she said, lowering her voice as if it were a shameful secret. "Just say you're between jobs if anyone asks. Graham's boss will be there. Robert Hale, he's COO at Stanton Dynamics. Serious people. Don't embarrass me." Her words landed like a slap. Little business. As though the years of risk, negotiation, and success amounted to nothing but a hobby I toyed with to pass time. I took a slow breath, forcing my expression into something neutral. "All right," I said finally, "if that's what you want." She seemed relieved, already glancing over her shoulder toward her friends. "Thank you. I just need everything to be perfect." As she walked away, laughter trailing in her wake, I sat very still. Robert Hale, Stanton Dynamics. The name was one I knew intimately. Only months before, I had signed the papers that made Whitmore Strategies the controlling stakeholder in his company. I hadn't planned it this way, but the intersection of our worlds was already set. For a brief moment, I imagined what would happen if I spoke the truth, if I told her, told them all. But then I looked at Vivian, radiant and carefree, and I let the thought go. Tomorrow was her day. My silence would remain intact. The reception dinner unfolded with all the elegance Vivian had dreamed of. Silver cutlery glinted beneath chandeliers. Servers glided between tables, and the vineyard's terrace shimmered in candlelight. It was a perfect scene, at least until the maid of honor rose to give her speech. She began sweetly enough, recalling childhood memories and college adventures with Vivian. Guests smiled, raising glasses in a gentle chorus of approval. But then her tone shifted, her eyes flicking toward me with a playful smirk. "And, of course, we can't forget about Vivian's big sister," she said, pausing for effect. "Our forever single queen, who's decided that chasing a late-life hobby is the way to keep busy." The room erupted in laughter. Forks clattered, shoulders shook, and whispers darted across tables like sparks. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, but I pressed my napkin against my lips and forced a polite smile. My pulse pounded, yet I stayed rooted, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. When the maid of honor finally sat down, Vivian took the microphone herself. I held my breath, hoping foolishly that she might soften the blow. Instead, she leaned into it. Yes, thank you for that. She laughed. My sister has definitely been on an adventure lately. She keeps talking about her so-called empire dreams. She raised her fingers in mocking quotes, but we try to remind her that some dreams have expiration dates. The laughter was louder this time, echoing against the walls, filling every corner of the hall. Even the servers struggled not to grin as they cleared plates. I sat there, smiling through the ache in my chest. I remembered my promise at the rehearsal dinner. No drama, no scenes. This was her day, and I would not ruin it, even if it meant swallowing every shard of humiliation she threw my way. So I straightened in my chair, breathed deeply, and told myself that silence was not weakness. Not yet. After the speeches, the sting didn't fade. It only sharpened as people drifted toward me with smiles that carried more pity than warmth. One woman leaned down as though speaking to a child and said, "It's so cute you're trying something new at your age. Keeps the mind sharp." She patted my hand before walking away, leaving behind the sour taste of condescension. Another guest clinked his glass, adding, "Never too late to chase a dream, even if it's just something small." My neighbor started selling jewelry on the side, made almost $300 last year. He beamed at me like we were equals. I forced a nod, my throat tight. Then Graham came over, his tie loosened, his champagne half gone. He lowered his voice as if sharing a kindness. "Don't worry, Selena. Hobbies keep you busy. You've done a good job helping with everything. Really." He gave my shoulder a patronizing pat and returned to his circle of colleagues, laughing with the ease of a man who believed he'd said something supportive. I sat frozen, my fork resting against the edge of my plate, my smile fixed like porcelain. Every comment chipped a little deeper than the public jokes had. Laughter from strangers was one thing, but Graham's quiet dismissal carried weight. And then came the words that nearly undid me. Passing near the bar, I heard Vivian's voice, hushed but cruelly clear. "She'll never be more than the single sister playing business. It's sad, really, but at least she feels important." Her bridesmaid giggled, replying, "Better that than her calling you every day." Vivian laughed with her, unbothered. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, my breath short and unsteady. That was the wound that cut deeper than any speech or toast. It wasn't just strangers who believed I was a failure. It was my own sister, the one whose wedding I had quietly built from the ground up. For the first time that night, I thought about leaving, about walking out the doors, slipping into the dark vineyard, and letting the rest of the evening carry on without me. I had nearly convinced myself to slip away when Robert Hale appeared at my table. He carried himself with the calm assurance of a man used to being noticed, though his tone was surprisingly gentle. "Ms. Whitmore, isn't it? I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Robert Hale, COO at Stanton Dynamics. Graham's mentioned you're in consulting." I hesitated. My instinct was to give the safe, rehearsed line Vivian demanded between jobs. Just dabbling. But the memory of her laughter, her cruel whispers with her bridesmaid, burned too hot in my chest. So I looked him squarely in the eye and said, "I work in acquisitions. My firm recently acquired Stanton Dynamics." His hand jerked, nearly sending champagne down his cuff. He blinked hard, then studied me again with new precision. "Wait. Stanton Dynamics. That acquisition was handled by Whitmore Strategies." "Yes," I said evenly. "Your S. Whitmore." His voice dropped, his expression shifting from polite courtesy to startled respect. "I am." For a beat, the noise of the reception seemed to fade. Then he straightened, almost as if standing before someone of higher rank. "Ms. Whitmore," he said carefully, this time with deliberate formality. It was subtle, but the weight in his voice was undeniable. I watched his eyes flick around the room, to the guests still laughing, to Graham, to Vivian. Disgust touched his features. I had no idea you were here. Enduring this. I gave a small shrug. The closest I would allow myself to showing the ache that lingered. It's my sister's wedding, I said softly. Tonight was never about me. But his gaze told me he disagreed, and I knew something had just shifted that would not be contained much longer. Robert Hale's jaw tightened as he looked around the hall, at the smirks and sideways glances still lingering after Vivian's jokes, without asking permission. He set down his glass, strode to the stage, and took the microphone from the DJ. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but cutting through the room like glass. "I need to say something." The chatter faded. Glasses stilled midair. 300 heads turned toward him. "We've all spent this evening laughing at Selena Whitmore," he continued, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. "But what most of you don't realize is that she is the owner of Stanton Dynamics, as well as 5 other companies in the tech sector. Many of you here tonight," his gaze landed squarely on Graham's colleagues, "actually work for her." The gasp that spread through the room was almost physical, a wave of shock rolling from table to table. Guests shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another in disbelief. One man dropped his fork, another paled visibly. I saw Vivian's face drain of color, her smile collapsing, while Graham looked like the air had been punched out of him. For a moment, I stayed seated, letting the silence deepen. Then I rose, smoothing my dress, and walked to the stage. Hale offered me the microphone. "Yes," I said, my voice calm but clear. "I am S. Whitmore of Whitmore Strategies." I kept quiet because this was my sister's day, not mine. But when you laugh at someone's worth, remember, sometimes silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes silence hides strength. The room was still, every eye fixed on me, and for the first time that evening, I no longer felt invisible. When the music finally resumed, the entire atmosphere had shifted. Guests who had smirked at me earlier now lined up with apologies, their voices dripping with nervous respect. A few even slipped me business cards, suddenly eager to connect. I smiled politely, but inside I felt detached. Their recognition meant little after the way they had laughed. Across the room, Graham stood stiffly beside his boss, his face flushed crimson. Hale clapped him on the shoulder once, curtly, then walked away. The humiliation was written all over him. Vivian found me later, her mascara streaked, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. I looked at her, steady and unflinching. "Because every time I tried, you rolled your eyes. You wanted me small so you could feel big." Her tears deepened, but I didn't soften. The truth was long overdue. 6 months later, the fractures remained. At family dinners, Graham now addressed me as Ms. Whitmore, his respect forced by circumstance. Vivian had finally agreed to therapy, where we sat side by side, unraveling the tangle of years spent in roles we hadn't chosen. Progress was slow, but at least it had begun. Through it all, I carried one realization with me: my power was never just in the companies I owned, but in the choice to stop letting anyone, family included, diminish me. Never underestimate the sister who stopped letting herself be underestimated. I was 9 years old the night everything shifted. Summer heat pressed against the walls of our house in Birmingham, the kind that made sleep feel impossible. I crept downstairs for a glass of water, my bare feet silent on the steps. That's when I heard them, my parents' voices, low and tired, drifting from the living room. "We can't keep going like this," my mother said, her tone sharp with exhaustion. 3 kids cost too much. We can barely cover Gavin's gear, Reed's tutoring. "It's impossible." I froze, clutching the banister. My father sighed, sounding older than I had ever noticed. "I know. Elaine, God, I know. But what do we do? The mortgage. My job, none of it's enough." Silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Then my mother's voice cut through it like a blade. We need a solution. A solution. The word echoed in my chest. There was a pause, and then my father's reply came. Careful and deliberate. Meredith has that big house in Arkansas. She's alone. She's always asking about the kids. At 9 years old. I didn't fully grasp what they were planning, but I understood enough to know that I was the problem to be solved. Gavin and Reed, my older brothers, were mentioned again: football, college, bright futures. My name never left their lips. The water glass trembled in my hand, and I slipped back upstairs, pressing my ear against the cool pillow. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. That night, for the first time, I realized love could be measured, weighed, and counted, and in their math. I didn't add up. I fell asleep wondering what it felt like to be wanted, not spared. A few weeks later, my parents told me we were taking a summer road trip. They said it like a gift, a surprise just for me. Gavin and Reed would be busy with football camp, but I would get to see my father's sister, Meredith, who lived in Arkansas. I tried to believe it was special, but the memory of their whispered words still clung to me like smoke. The drive felt endless. My parents made small talk about gas prices and work, but no one asked me what I was excited to do. My stomach churned with equal parts anticipation and dread. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Meredith's house rose in front of me like something out of another world. Tall white columns, wide lawns, everything in its place. Meredith stepped outside to greet us, her silver hair pulled back neatly, her blue eyes piercing. But when she looked at me, her face softened in a way I had never seen before. "So this is Anelise," she said, her voice steady yet warm. She crouched down slightly, meeting my eyes directly. "Hello, sweetheart. I've been waiting to meet you, for the first time." Someone wasn't glancing past me toward Gavin or Reed. I felt seen, and the sensation was almost frightening. We went inside, and while the adults spoke in low tones, I explored the room with its polished furniture and shelves of books. Then my father stood. "We should get back on the road." I jumped up, ready to gather my things. But my mother's voice stopped me cold. "Actually, Anelise, you'll stay here with Aunt Meredith for a while." The words struck like thunder. My brothers were home, and I was not. I watched their car disappear down the driveway as Meredith laid a hand on my shoulder. The first nights in Meredith's house felt unreal, like I had stumbled into someone else's life. My room was larger than the space I'd shared with both my brothers, with a canopy bed and wide windows that overlooked a garden. At first, I lay awake, waiting for the sound of my parents' car pulling back into the driveway, but each morning, it was only Meredith's knock on my door, gentle and patient. She asked me questions that startled me: what books I liked, whether I preferred pancakes or eggs for breakfast, what subjects at school were easiest, what made me nervous. At home in Alabama, no one had ever asked me those things. Not really. I found myself answering cautiously, like if I said the wrong thing, she'd lose interest. But she never did. Instead, she leaned in, asked follow-up questions, and remembered what I'd said. We started building small routines. After school, she'd sit with me at the kitchen table while I worked through homework, guiding me when I got stuck instead of brushing me aside. On weekends, she taught me how to measure flour for cookies, how to season food properly. At night, she let me curl up next to her on the couch while old movies played, pointing out which lines had once made her laugh when she was my age. Every gesture told me I mattered, and yet, beneath the warmth, a knot lingered in my chest. Weeks went by without a phone call from Alabama. I tried to convince myself the silence meant my parents regretted their decision, that they were working out a plan to bring me home. Each time the phone rang, my stomach flipped, only to fall again when it was a coworker or a neighbor for Meredith. Still, as days slipped into months, I began to sense that Meredith's presence wasn't temporary. She didn't treat me like a burden she was helping to shoulder. She treated me like her own. It was the first time I felt chosen, though a part of me still ached, waiting for voices that never came. By the time I turned 14, life with Meredith had become steady, almost ordinary. I was settled into school, had a circle of friends, and even played soccer on the weekends. Meredith was at every game, her sharp voice carrying across the field when I scored. For a long time. I convinced myself that was enough, that the emptiness left by my parents' absence didn't matter. But the silence had weight. 6 years of it pressed down until it felt like part of my skin. One evening, after dinner, Meredith cleared the plates and sat across from me at the kitchen table. Her expression was calm, but I could feel the tension in the air. "Anelise," she said carefully, "would you like to see your parents? I can reach out if that's what you want." The question lodged in my chest like a stone. I stared at my hands, twisting a napkin until it tore. Part of me wanted to say yes, to imagine they'd changed their minds, that I'd walk into a room and they would finally pull me close and apologize. But another, louder part of me remembered the endless birthdays without cards, the Christmases without calls, the nights I had gone to bed, hoping the phone would ring. "No," I said at last. My voice shook. But the answer felt solid. If they wanted to see me, they would have tried by now. 6 years. Meredith. Not one word. She nodded slowly, her blue eyes soft with sadness. "Marcus has always been selfish," she admitted. "But none of this is your fault. He failed you, not the other way around." Her words sank deep, though the ache didn't disappear. I carried it upstairs that night, whispering to myself that I would not wait for people who had already let me go. And just as I learned to accept that silence, another shadow began to creep into our home. It started with small things. Meredith would come home from work exhausted, brushing it off as long days at the office. Then she began losing weight, her clothes hanging loose in ways that made me uneasy. By the time she admitted something was wrong, I was 16 and old enough to recognize the fear behind her steady voice when she told me the doctors had found cancer. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the same spot where she once asked if I wanted to see my parents. This time, her face was pale, her hands trembling around a coffee cup. "It's serious," she said quietly, "but I'm going to fight it." In that moment, I understood that the woman who had carried me through everything now needed me to carry her. Our routines changed overnight. I learned how to cook meals that were gentle on her stomach, to keep the house in order when she was too tired to move from the couch. The day I got my driver's license, my first trip wasn't to celebrate with friends, but to take Meredith to chemotherapy. I waited in sterile hospital lobbies, clutching homework I couldn't concentrate on, watching people my age scroll their phones while I memorized medication schedules. Meredith never stopped teaching, even when she was sick. She sat with me and showed me how to balance a checkbook, how to track expenses, how to plan for emergencies. "Money," she said one afternoon, her voice thin but firm, "isn't just numbers, it's control. Never let anyone make you feel powerless because you don't understand it." I absorbed every word, writing notes in the margins of her old finance books. It gave me a strange kind of courage, as if she were handing me tools I would need long after she was gone. Some nights, when she was too weak to climb the stairs, I slept on the couch near her so she wouldn't feel alone. I hated the quiet sound of her labored breathing, the reminder that nothing was certain anymore. And just when it seemed the illness would consume every corner of our lives, the doctors used a word I hadn't dared hope for: remission. When I turned 18, Meredith was already fading again. The remission we had celebrated 2 years earlier had only been a pause, a fragile truce with something relentless. She tried to keep her strength, but I could see it slipping from her in the way she leaned heavier on the banister, in the way her voice thinned by evening, on my birthday. She insisted on baking me a cake, though her hands shook as she measured the sugar. We sat together at the dining table, just the two of us. The cake was lopsided, but to me, it was perfect. That night, she handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate necklace, a gold chain with a simple pendant that had once belonged to her mother. Her eyes glistened as she fastened it around my neck. "You're strong, smart, and kind," she whispered. Never forget that. No matter what happens, you'll always carry those things with you. They'll protect you more than money ever could. I wanted to believe her strength would hold forever, but months later I was sitting at her hospital bedside, clutching her frail hand as her breathing slowed. She slipped away quietly, like a candle flickering out. The funeral blurred by. Faces I didn't know offering condolences I barely heard. It was Mr. Blackwood, Meredith's lawyer, who sat me down afterward and explained what she had left behind. The house, her accounts, everything $3 million in total was mine. I should have felt secure, but all I felt was hollow. The walls of the mansion, once filled with her steady voice and careful presence, now echoed with silence. Every room reminded me of her absence. Every object a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. And just as I was beginning to understand what it meant to be alone, there came a knock at the door, 3 days after the funeral. I was still wandering the halls like a ghost, unsure what to do next. When the doorbell rang, my chest tightened as I walked down the long hallway, and when I looked through the glass, my stomach dropped. Standing on the porch were the 4 people I hadn't seen in 11 years, my parents and my brothers. My mother was the first to move. She stepped forward with a bright, brittle smile and reached for me. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her arms outstretched. I froze, the smell of lilies from the funeral still clinging to my clothes. My father brushed past me without waiting for permission, his eyes roaming the foyer like he was cataloging it. Gavin and Reed followed, their gazes sweeping over the furniture, the art on the walls, the polished wood floors. "It's good to see you," my father said, settling into a chair as if it were his own. "We're here to make sure you're not alone." I stayed standing, my hands gripping the door frame. "Where were you 3 days ago?" My voice was sharper than I intended. Mother waved her hand lightly. "Oh, Anelise. You know, we had Gavin's promotion party. Everyone was already coming. The catering was paid for. We couldn't cancel something so important." Her words landed with a sickening weight. They had chosen a party over a funeral. Over me. "But we're here now," she added quickly, patting the couch beside her as if I might sit down like a child eager for comfort. "You need your real family." I laughed then, the sound hollow even to my own ears. My real family was buried this week. The words hung between us, and for the first time I saw their smiles falter, though only for a moment, because beneath their rehearsed sorrow, their eyes glittered with something else, entirely hunger. And that was the moment I understood they hadn't come to comfort me. They had come for the house. It didn't take long for their masks to slip. My father leaned back in the chair as though he owned the house. "This estate is too much for a girl your age to handle. As Elizabeth's brother, I should inherit half. It's only fair." Reed smirked and added, "And let's be honest. Anelise, you're 19. What do you know about managing $3 million? The number rang in the air like a warning bell. My mother reached for my hand, her eyes wide with feigned concern. "Sweetheart, you need guidance. We're still your parents. By law. We're your guardians until you're 19 in Alabama." Her words snapped something inside me. 11 years of silence, and now they wanted to claim me again. I excused myself, went upstairs, and pulled out the card Meredith's lawyer had given me at the funeral. My hands shook as I dialed. "Mr. Blackwood, it's Anelise. They're here. They won't leave." "I'll be there shortly," he said firmly. "Don't sign or agree to anything." 20 minutes later, he walked in, tall and composed, carrying his briefcase like a weapon. My family stiffened at the sight of him. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly. "I'm Jonathan Blackwood, Ms. Rowan's attorney. I understand there's been some confusion." My father straightened, puffing out his chest. "We're not confused. She's still a minor under Alabama law. We're her guardians." Mr. Blackwood opened his case and pulled out documents, his voice calm but unyielding. Anelise has been a legal resident of Arkansas for over a decade. Here, the age of majority is 18. Furthermore, her parents relinquished their rights when Meredith legally adopted her. You have no claim, legal or otherwise, over her or this estate. The silence was sharp, broken only by Reed's angry laugh. This is insane. Mr. Blackwood closed his folder with finality. What's insane is believing you can erase 11 years of neglect with a sudden interest in her bank account. Their faces hardened, and desperation flickered in their eyes as I realized they would not give up easily. After Mr. Blackwood forced them out, I thought it was over, but the calls began almost immediately. Unknown numbers at all hours of the day. Voices I hadn't heard since childhood now trying to thread their way back into my life. Gavin was the first. Look, Anelise, you've got more money than you know what to do with. I'm getting married. All I need is a down payment for a house. It would mean the world to me. His voice was smooth, practiced, as if he were negotiating a deal instead of talking to his sister. Then Reed, I've got a business opportunity, big returns. Guaranteed. You could triple your inheritance if you just back me. The desperation under his bravado was obvious, but he disguised it with bravado, as though I should be grateful for the chance to invest. My mother's calls were the hardest to hear. Her sobs bled through the voicemail. We made a terrible mistake. You're our baby. Anelise, I can't sleep knowing what we did. Please forgive us. We just need help. That's all. Each message was saved, cataloged, and stored, just as Mr. Blackwood instructed, after a month. He sent them a formal cease and desist, outlining every instance of harassment. He warned them that if they continued, we would seek a restraining order. The calls stopped. The silence that followed was jarring, almost louder than their voices had been, for the first time. The house was mine alone. No ringing phone, no echoes of demands, no reminders of the people who had thrown me away. But as the quiet settled in, I felt both relief and unease, as though I were standing in the eye of a storm, unsure if the winds would return. By the time I started college, the weight of those calls and threats had faded into memory. I chose to study finance, not only because it fascinated me, but because it felt like a way to carry Meredith forward. Every lecture, every late night bent over numbers, reminded me of the afternoons she spent showing me how to make sense of money, teaching me that knowledge was protection. The house no longer felt like a tomb. Slowly, I filled it with pieces of my own life friends from campus who came by for study sessions. Shelves lined with books I had chosen, fresh flowers in the kitchen because Meredith had always loved them. I kept her necklace close, wearing it on exam days, letting it rest against my collarbone like an anchor. Sometimes, when I sat at her desk reviewing case studies, I heard her voice in my mind, calm and steady. Never let anyone make you feel powerless. Those words carried me through the moments I doubted myself, through the nights when loneliness pressed too hard. Blood had abandoned me, but choice had embraced me. Meredith had chosen me when no one else would, and because of her, I learned that family isn't written in DNA. It's built in loyalty, in sacrifice, in the decision to stay when things grow difficult. I live with that truth now. When I lock the front door at night, the sound no longer echoes in an empty house, it seals a home, one built on love that cannot be taken away. In the end, what defines family, the blood that leaves you, or the love that stays? Outline story. Outline title, my parents said 3 kids. Cost too much, then abandoned me. 11 years later, they returned for my $3 million inheritance. Protagonist, Anelise Rowan. 19, strong-willed, sensitive, resilient. Setting starts in Birmingham, Alabama, aunt's estate in Little Rock, Arkansas. 9-year-old Anelise overhears her parents, Marcus and Elaine Rowan, whispering that 3 kids cost too much. She realizes her brothers, Gavin and Reed, are the priority. Her innocence fractures when she senses she may be the solution. Hook if love can be measured in dollars. What does that make a child worth? Anelise is taken on a summer trip to visit Aunt Meredith in Arkansas instead of returning. Her parents abandon her, Meredith, a sharp yet warm woman, notices her shock and treats her with dignity. Anelise's grief explodes when she realizes her brothers were kept, not her. Hook. When family leaves you behind, do you chase them or let them go? Meredith gives Anelise real attention, asking about her interests and listening. Anelise experiences love through small rituals, homework help, cooking together, quiet talks, for the first time. She feels chosen, yet she wonders if silence from Alabama means her parents regret it. Hook. What hurts more, the words that cut you, or the silence that follows? At 14, Meredith gently asks if Anelise wants to see her parents. She declines. Realizing 6 years without a single call means the answer is clear. Meredith admits her brother Marcus was always selfish, but assures Anelise she is not to blame. Hook. Can a wound ever heal if the knife is never removed? Meredith falls ill with cancer. Anelise, now 16, takes over household duties, drives her to treatment, and grows into strength through caregiving. She learns financial lessons from Meredith: budgeting, responsibility, independence. Hook. When the one who saved you begins to fade, how do you prepare to stand alone at 18? Anelise receives Meredith's heirloom necklace and words of pride. You're strong, smart, and kind. Never forget that. Months later, Meredith dies. The will leaves Anelise a $3 million estate. Grief collides with fear as she faces the empty mansion. Hook. Is an inheritance a blessing, or just another way for grief to echo? Days after the funeral, her parents and brothers appear. Fake smiles, forced hugs, and greedy eyes betray them. They settle in like owners, claiming she needs her real family now. Their absence at the funeral reveals their true colors. Hook. When ghosts return wearing familiar faces, do you welcome them or bolt the door? They demand access to the thream, claiming guardianship. Anelise calls Meredith's lawyer, Mr. Blackwood, who dismantles their arguments. She's legally adopted, a legal adult in Arkansas, and sole heir. The family's outrage turns desperate. Hook. When the law silences lies, will greed ever truly accept defeat? Her family harasses her with calls and guilt trips. Gavin wants a house. Reed wants business money. Her mother sobs about mistakes. Anelise keeps records. And Blackwood sends a cease and desist. The silence afterward is heavy but freeing. Hook. When silence returns. Is it peace or just the calm before another storm, now in college? Anelise studies finance, honoring Meredith's legacy. She reflects that blood abandoned her, but choice embraced her. Meredith's voice still guides her. Proving family is loyalty, not DNA. She locks the door to her home with quiet certainty. Hook. Final. In the end, what defines family? The blood that leaves you, or the love that stays?